Russia's grip on Crimea is slipping. In the past 5 months, Ukraine has executed a systematic campaign to strangle every major supply route feeding Putin's prized peninsula. The KERCH Bridge, crippled by underwater explosives. The railway network, obliterated by precision drone strikes. The land corridor, under constant bombardment. Russia's military logistics in Crimea are facing a crisis that could reshape the entire southern front of this war. Here's what's actually happening on the ground. On June 3, 2025, Ukrainian SBU operatives pulled off one of the war's most audacious attacks. They planted approximately 1,100 kilograms of TNT-equivalent explosives targeting the underwater pillars of the KERCH Bridge, Putin's $3.7 billion symbol of Crimean annexation. The bridge had been hit twice before, in October 2022 and July 2023. But this third strike was different. The underwater approach meant Russian surveillance couldn't detect the threat until it was too late. Now here's the critical part. While Russia reopened the bridge the same day, the damage runs deeper than Moscow admits. On November 3, 2025, Russian authorities banned all electric and hybrid vehicles from crossing. The engineering reality is stark. The KERCH Bridge spans 19 kilometers across the Kerch Strait, making it the longest bridge in Europe. Each strike weakens the structural integrity of the underwater support pillars. Russian engineers have conducted emergency repairs after each attack, but underwater structural damage is cumulative and progressive. Military logistics experts estimate the bridge can currently handle approximately 60 to 70% of its original capacity. Russian military planners are forced to space out heavy convoy movements, limit simultaneous crossings, and conduct constant structural monitoring. The bridge remains operational, but it's a ticking time bomb. And that's exactly Ukraine's strategic goal, not complete destruction, but sustained degradation that forces Russia into impossible logistics calculations. July 19, 2025, Ukrainian drones struck the Kamennolomni rail junction in Rostov Oblast. But Ukraine wasn't done. On November 1st and 2nd, 2025, just days ago, coordinated strikes hammered railway substations in Krasnovardisk and Dzhankoi. Without functioning rail lines through Dzhankoi, Russia loses its most efficient method of moving ammunition, fuel, and heavy equipment to frontline units. The mathematics of military logistics are unforgiving. A single freight train can carry the equivalent of 280 trucks worth of supplies. Forcing Russia from rail to road transport doesn't just slow things down, it fundamentally changes the logistics equation. Ukrainian partisan networks added another layer of chaos. Saboteurs targeted relay cabinets and railway facilities across occupied territories. A single damaged relay cabinet can shut down kilometers of track for days. Train movement slowed to manual operations, cutting capacity by 60 to 70%. This corridor is a logistics nightmare. The route stretches approximately 250 kilometers through territory Ukraine never stopped contesting. Every convoy moving through this route is exposed to HIMARS strikes, drone attacks, and partisan ambushes. Russian convoys must travel in groups for mutual protection, but grouping makes them easier targets for Ukrainian long-range systems. They must travel at night to avoid drone surveillance, but night movement slows speeds and increases accident rates. Ukrainian forces have systematically targeted fuel depots along this corridor. Port Kavkaz oil terminal near the Kerch Strait hit multiple times in August and September 2025, causing massive fires that destroyed an estimated 4,000 tons of fuel. Storage facilities in Melitopol regularly struck throughout October. The message is clear. Even if Russian trucks make it through, they're burning fuel faster than they can resupply it. A typical Russian military convoy traveling from Rostov-on-Don to Sevastopol covers approximately 550 kilometers. That means each truck burns 140 to 180 liters just making the journey, before delivering any fuel to end users. The strategic calculation is brilliant. Ukraine doesn't need to completely sever this route. They just need to make it so dangerous and inefficient that Russia can't sustain major offensive operations from Crimea. And that's exactly what's happening. Russian forces in Crimea are increasingly defensive, not offensive. They're conserving ammunition. They're rationing fuel. The Black Sea Fleet has reduced sortie rates. That sounds substantial until you understand the demand side. Russia is barely meeting minimum requirements, with zero margin for stockpiling, zero capacity for offensive buildups, and zero resilience against further Ukrainian strikes. Think of it like this. Imagine trying to supply a city of 2.4 million people and tens of thousands of troops through 3 damaged highways that are constantly under attack. You can do it, barely, but you can't launch major offensives. You can't build up massive ammunition reserves. You can't operate with the freedom of maneuver that modern warfare demands. That's Putin's Crimea problem in November 2025. Why does this matter for the broader war? First, Crimea is Russia's primary naval base for Black Sea operations. The Black Sea Fleet, headquartered in Sevastopol, is Russia's only warm-water naval force with direct Mediterranean access. Without reliable logistics, the fleet becomes increasingly vulnerable. We've already seen Ukraine sink or damage multiple Russian warships: the Moskva cruiser, the Novicherkassk landing ship, the Minsk intelligence vessel. Now, repairing and resupplying those vessels becomes exponentially harder. Dry dock facilities need spare parts. Repair crews need equipment. Ships need fuel and ammunition. All of it flows through those 3 compromised supply routes. Second, Crimea was supposed to be a staging ground for operations into southern Ukraine. Russian forces were meant to push north from Crimea, while Eastern forces pushed west, creating a pincer movement to encircle Ukrainian forces. But you can't launch sustained offensives when your supply lines are this fragile. Ukrainian intelligence reports indicate Russian forces in Crimea have shifted from offensive to defensive postures, focusing on holding territory rather than taking new ground. Third, this is economic warfare at its finest. Every ruble Russia spends repairing bridges, railways, and fuel depots is a ruble not spent on new tanks, artillery shells, or drone systems. Ukraine is forcing Russia into a logistics arms race it can't win. Russian military budgets are already strained. Diverting resources to infrastructure repair accelerates the economic pressure. Fourth, morale. Russian soldiers in Crimea know they're increasingly isolated. They see the strikes. They experience the fuel shortages. They understand that if Ukraine decides to push hard, resupply and reinforcement will be slow, dangerous, and uncertain. Morale problems lead to discipline problems, which lead to combat effectiveness problems. What makes this campaign remarkable is Ukraine's tactical sophistication. This isn't random bombing. It's systematic infrastructure warfare based on NATO doctrine and adapted for Ukrainian capabilities. They're using a layered approach. Layer 1, long-range strikes. ATACMS missiles with 300-kilometer range, Storm Shadow cruise missiles with 250-kilometer range, and modified Neptune anti-ship missiles hitting high-value targets like bridges and rail junctions. These are precision weapons used sparingly against critical nodes. Layer 2, persistent drone harassment. Smaller, cheaper drones conducting daily strikes on fuel depots, ammunition storage, and supply convoys. These cost $1,000 to $50,000 per unit, but force Russia to expend million-dollar air defense missiles or risk losing multi-million-dollar fuel depots. Layer 3, partisan sabotage, local resistance networks cutting cables, damaging relay systems, and gathering intelligence on Russian logistics movements. These operations cost almost nothing but create disproportionate disruption. Layer 4, naval drone attacks, targeting Port Kavkaz and other coastal logistics hubs with unmanned surface vessels loaded with explosives. Ukraine has pioneered this technology, turning cheap platforms into strategic weapons. Each layer reinforces the others. A partisan cuts a railway relay, forcing Russians to reroute through a specific junction, which Ukrainian intelligence then targets with a precision strike. It's coordinated, it's relentless, and it's working. The cost-benefit analysis is staggering. Ukraine spends approximately $50,000 to $200,000 per major strike. Russia loses fuel depots worth $5 to $10 million, railway infrastructure requiring $20 to $50 million to repair, and operational capacity that can't be measured in dollars alone. This is asymmetric warfare at its most effective, small investments creating massive strategic returns. So where does this leave us? What's the endgame for Crimea's supply crisis? Ukraine has 3 potential paths forward, and they're likely pursuing all 3 simultaneously. Path 1. Sustained attrition. Continue the current strategy of degrading supply routes without attempting full severance. This keeps Russian forces in Crimea weak, defensive, and unable to threaten Ukrainian positions. It's the low-risk, high-reward approach that's working right now. Path 2. Escalated interdiction. If Western allies provide additional long-range weapons or lift remaining restrictions, Ukraine could attempt to completely sever one or more supply routes. Destroying the Kerch Bridge permanently would be the ultimate strategic prize, forcing Russia to rely entirely on the vulnerable land corridor. Path 3. Crimean offensive. Once Russian logistics are sufficiently degraded, Ukraine could launch a major offensive to retake parts of Crimea. This is the highest-risk option, but would fundamentally change the war's trajectory. Without reliable resupply, Russian forces defending Crimea would face the same fate as their troops in Kherson in 2022: retreat or encirclement. The timeline matters. Winter is approaching, which historically favors defenders. But winter also increases fuel consumption, strains logistics networks, and makes infrastructure repair more difficult. Russia's supply crisis could actually worsen over the next 3 months. Meanwhile, Ukraine continues building its long-range strike capabilities. Domestic drone production has increased dramatically. New partnerships with Western defense contractors are yielding results. Every month, Ukraine's ability to hit targets deep in Russian-occupied territory improves. The strategic momentum is clearly with Ukraine. Russia is playing defense, reacting to Ukrainian initiatives rather than executing its own strategic vision. That's not a winning position in modern warfare. Russia hasn't lost Crimea yet, but Putin's logistics nightmare is real, growing, and reshaping the strategic balance in southern Ukraine. The supply routes aren't destroyed, but they're crippled. And in modern warfare, a crippled supply line is often worse than a destroyed one. It ties up resources, creates uncertainty, and slowly bleeds combat effectiveness. Ukraine's message is clear. Crimea's isolation isn't a future threat. It's happening now. And every day Russia struggles to keep those supply lines open is a day Ukraine grows stronger, a day Russian forces grow weaker, and a day closer to a strategic tipping point. The question isn't whether Russia can supply Crimea. It's whether they can supply it well enough to hold it. And right now, the answer is increasingly uncertain. This is the war of logistics, infrastructure, and patience. Ukraine is winning at one bridge strike, one railway sabotage, and one fuel depot explosion at a time. The Crimean supply crisis isn't just a tactical problem for Russia. It's a strategic catastrophe that could determine the outcome of the entire war. The clock is ticking. The supplies are dwindling. And Putin's Crimean fortress is looking more like a trap with every passing day. If you found this deep dive into Ukraine's logistics warfare valuable, make sure you're subscribed to our channel. We're tracking every development in this conflict with OSINT verified intelligence and strategic analysis you won't find anywhere else.